All right, ladies and gents, I am super thrilled to introduce you to one of my good friends. Gosh, Chris, how long now has it been since? I mean, it's been over a decade
It
for
has
sure,
been 12 years, give or take.
easily. Yeah. So I've known
Yeah.
Chris since we were both like babies in this market. I was a I was a brand new agent. I just remember going to these trainings, and there was always this guy that sat up front, always asked really great questions, was taking notes, was always just really super high energy, super positive guy. I was like, man, I was like, that guy's interesting. He stands out in like the right ways, right? And he always showed up to all the things. And so, fast forward, I had the privilege and opportunity of seeing Chris also step into a lot of the same roles and opportunities that I did. And so we got to go to a lot of the same trainings. And then, you know, was it 2 years ago? Because it just showed up on memories. So I started running a little while back, and Chris started his fitness journey. How long ago now?
It would have been 2021.
Okay, yeah. So you
Yeah.
started about 2021, and then
Right.
we went on a 12-mile run in 2022. Chris,
Yes.
I posted. I was like, "Hey, who's up for like a nice slow long run?" And Chris reached out, and it was 2 years ago right now. So it's kind of warm, and Chris shows up in two cotton t-shirts, and I'm looking
Man.
at him, and I'm like, "Oh no, has anyone ever told you what happens in a cotton t-shirt after like 6 miles?" Like, oh no. We went on the run, and I don't know if was that already like one of your longer runs that you've ever run, or
It was the longest in my life. I had a plan that I intended to follow because you and Steve agreed to run the Kansas City Marathon.
right,
And I'm like,
right.
okay, I'm gonna do that. And yet, so I signed up as well. And I was not following the plan that I had, and yet I didn't want to disappoint you. Unfortunately, looking back, I was more committed to not disappointing you than I was committed to myself. And yet I
To your
chose to
health and
show up and,
safety.
and endure the run. And I don't think I've ever shared this because I haven't thought much about it, but I'd like to share why I wore two shirts. I wore two shirts because everything wiggled and jiggled. And I thought if I wore an extra layer of clothing and tucked it in tight, it would slim me down. That's the truth.
Wow.
It didn't, just so you know, just made it hot.
Yeah, I really felt for you. But one of the things, like, okay, so from that day, like,
Yeah.
Chris just endured. And
Mm.
so in the 2 hours, 2.5 hours where we ran, we had probably um I would say we had an opportunity to get to know one another at a
Yeah.
level that like we never had a chance to. Chris shared things with me, and then I was able to share things with him, and so we became a
Mhm.
different kind of friend at that point. And then afterwards, um, I gave you some electrolytes, and then you took them, and then you threw up promptly after on the way home or something. Is that what?
Yes, I didn't just throw up though. I went home from the run because the family was waiting on me. We were going to a lake house down at Lake of the Ozarks with some family. My father-in-law, just imagine this, it was my three children, my wife, and my father-in-law in the Toyota Sienna driving down to the Lake of the Ozarks. I'm feeling nauseous. It's a 3 hour drive. And I told my wife, I said, babe, you're gonna have to pull over. And I not only did I puked in front of my entire family, including my father-in-law. And I mean, it was ugly. It was
So
ugly.
so the 12-mile run. So I'm sharing this for a reason. I promise there's a thread to this. Is so um I was slowing down to work with Chris on this run. And this is about halfway through the marathon training. Our marathon was in October. And so we were
Mhm.
right at the beginning or middle of the training. And um, fast forward to the race itself, Chris and I started at the same time. I remember seeing Chris right around mile 15 as he's passing me. And then from mile 15 all the way to 26, I could never catch up with him. He finished well before me. And then from that moment on, Chris took on like a whole different persona. And you
Mm.
started doing the triathlons. Like I never was able to catch up. And now I watch your stats, I watch your numbers because I remember because I'm very heart rate based training, et cetera. And I'm looking at your stuff, and your now heart race zone 2 efforts are like my threshold runs speed
Mm.
wise. And so I've always been super impressed because the only way to get there for anyone who does any kind of high level endurance training is the only way to get faster is to go slower for longer. And that's the part so many people don't get. Like, you don't get faster through sprints. You actually get faster for endurance stuff by going slower longer. This is also a business lesson, guys. The agents who experience massive success quickly, it's difficult for them to sustain. And those that have been in the business for a minute, that have built something really long lasting, had to do it slower for longer. So I've always been super impressed with Chris. Chris is now doing so many different things. He's written a book and inspired me to finally get my book started. In fact, I'm using the same coach that he had for his book. And tell us a little bit more about the book, Chris, the title, and then how you came up with it, and just let's just get into it.
Yeah, I thought about the question, where did I get the idea to write a book? Like, when can I go back to the beginning of that? And I was showing a house. I was at a listing appointment actually out in Lee Summit. And I went downstairs and there was this old lady. She was like 80, probably 85 years old on a Mac. And I just remember thinking, man, good for her. She's sitting there, this old lady on a Mac just typing. And I went over and introduced myself because I was coming down into like her living area of this lower level. And I introduced myself and she said, oh, don't mind me. I'll just be sitting here writing. And I said, may I ask what you're writing? She goes, oh, I'm writing another book. And I was just blown away. And I thought, good for her. And I asked her, it's just a question that just came out. Because at that point, I think I've thought about writing a book before, but it was never a reoccurring thought. And yet I asked her, for whatever reason, I said, what's your best tip if somebody desires to write a book? And without hesitation, she answered and she said this, Matt. She said, just start writing. Even if it's a sentence or two a day, just start writing. And looking back, that's what I started doing. It was journaling. It drives my wife nuts because she's a minimalist. And so I hide my old journals. Just saw them last night going through my lower drawer. I have these moleskins journals, probably 12 of them over the years. But going back about 15 years ago, I took her advice and just started journaling. And the interesting thing about training is my coach taught me you train like you race, meaning that it's a little bit different if you're running a marathon. You know this, Matt, and others that have ran. Like most people show up with these things, their phone in their hand and on their arm and all that, and listen to music and stuff. And yet my coach taught me to train like we race. And with triathlons, you can't have any devices like these. You'll get disqualified because it's too dangerous. And so now I'm training and I'm just left with me and my thoughts. And that was an interesting place to live in. And I'm wondering, for you, I'd like to ask the question, what space are you creating in your life to just be left alone and pay attention to the thoughts you think? That was honestly more challenging than any of the exercises I did to become a triathlete. Wrestling with the thoughts that would just pop up when I'm alone by myself swimming. Boy, that was an interesting journey, Matt.
Wow. I trust everybody that's listening has an opportunity to be writing some of these things down, right? You've already hit. If you guys are paying attention, I made a post the other day that interestingly got a lot of comments on it, and it said, "Isn't it fascinating how the smartest people that I know ask the best questions, while the most insecure can't stop telling you what they know?" And Chris has already dropped like 3 or 4 really powerful questions and exhibited how curious he is, even in the midst of somebody like an 85-year-old woman doing, like, how many of you like walking around in your mind go, oh, that's really cool. But Chris goes, what's the number one tip you would give somebody who's considering getting started in writing? Like, what a powerful question, especially from somebody that's doing it. And the answer is just start writing. So how many of you on the call are like, man, what's the best way to start a YouTube channel? What's the best way to start a blog? What's the best way for me to start doing Instagram reels? What's the best way for me to start getting content on stories? Guess what? Start. Start. Love that. Love that. Yeah. So full transparency, I still run with all the devices. It's a challenge for me to go like completely like in here. So, okay, so the book is called Path to Purpose. And I had an opportunity to hear you talk a little bit about that at your launch party. down at the bowling alley where Sophie and I got to go, and you told a little bit of a story around it. Can you share a little bit about that with our group?
You know, I was thinking about it this morning in preparation to being here with you guys, and I want to touch on something I've actually never shared before. This, I don't know if you could see the logo. Can you see that?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So this logo, it actually has significance to me. I grew up in Seattle, Washington,
Mhm.
and you know, all of us have a story of our background, and I know all of us have been through challenging times, and yet part of my story is that I grew up in pay by the week motels where there was a lot of prostitution and drugs. And
Mhm.
what this logo represents, the mountain in particular. If you know any, who's been to Seattle, just curious, give me a thumbs up or raise your hand. Oh, okay, Mark, very good. You ever been to Pike Place Market? Oh, okay, it's a touristy thing, neat place to experience down by the Space Needle downtown and all that. And yet, growing up, it was always chaotic. I went from one abusive stepdad to the next, and yet we oftentimes lived pay by the week motels in Seattle, like I mentioned. And eventually I got tired of that when I was about 15 and a half and moved out, which blows my mind because our middle child will be 16. I'm thinking, I cannot imagine my daughter Aubrey moving out of the house now. Like, she's so not ready for that. And yet the mountain on the front of the book represents, I remember seeing Mount Rainier in the background. You remember seeing that, Matt or Mark? I mean, it's beautiful and it just fascinated and intrigued me. And yet there's a path leading up to it. And so I'm curious. I like to ask questions. I actually wrote a book that I haven't even talked about, Matt. It's called 1500 Coaching Questions to Unlock Your Potential. And they're just good reflective questions. My favorite part of that isn't the questions, the 1500 questions. My favorite part is that in the back of that book, there's like 20 blank pages for people to jot down their own questions they come up with or hear from others like you, Matt. And so with the mountain, it's symbolic to possibilities, like staying curious about life. I wonder what the mountaintop looks like. The interesting thing about a mountaintop is we like to travel to Colorado. Who loves Colorado here? Just curious. Colorado. Okay, Mark, you and I have some very
I
good,
think,
cool.
yeah, I think we're 10 out of 10
And
on that one. Yeah.
exactly. So going out to Colorado, I've always loved it. The interesting thing, whether it's Mount Rainier in Washington or Pikes Peak or just pick the mountain, unless you're at Mount Everest, I've never been there. And yet when you get to the peak of a mountain, the interesting thing is usually there's a bigger mountain. And so mountain, to me, it's like one way to say it is like stay hungry. What's at the top of the mountain? What's the goal? What am I aspiring for in this season of my life? Because I realize that another thing that the mountain represents is placing in front of me what can feel like a mountain, right? Don't lose track of some of the things that Matt emphasizes here today by being lost in like, oh, I would never be into running or triathlon or any of that. That's not the point. The point is what are you keeping in front of you that's causing you to stretch and grow and stay hungry for more in your life? Maybe it's more intentionality to be a husband, father, a wife, a friend, a daughter, a business owner that creates opportunities for others. What is it for you that's causing you to grow and aspiring you to keep moving, taking forward progress in your life?
So good. I wasn't prepared for you to be asking questions. I'm supposed to be the one asking questions. This is fun. This is fun. Um, so okay, so what did you discover? Like, so you took on this challenge of writing your first book. And what's some of the things that you discovered about yourself in the process, right? So you took the lady's advice and just started writing. So what was
Mm-hmm.
that like? How did you start? Were there any challenges along the way? Did you ever second guess yourself? How has like imposter syndrome ever played a role in your life? And then how do you overcome
Um, yes to all of that.
it?
And narrow it down to one question for me, Matt.
So how did you begin the book process? Like at what point you're like, you know what? We're doing it. And what was that catalyst or what was the tipping point of like, all right, enough's enough. It's time to get to work on this book.
Yeah. So when it comes to, I did Chattanooga Ironman last year in October, which is it was 144.6 miles. You know,
A full blast
full,
one.
that's correct. Yeah. So I was training for that. And if you're unfamiliar with that, what that is, it's a 2.4 mile swim in a river there, followed by a 122 mile bike ride, followed by a full marathon, 26.6 miles or whatever it is. And so I had some think time last year. If you average it out, what's interesting, Matt, like that sounds like a long distance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're David Goggins, and he would laugh at that. That would be his warm up. The point is that um, it breaks down. I averaged it out last year. It ended up being an hour and 15 minutes of running, swimming, and biking over the year. That's it. So isn't it interesting sometimes if we break down what could seem to be the mountain or the big goal, that it actually becomes something that's manageable if we could figure out what are the steps that I need to follow today. It broke down to an hour and 15 minutes. So I had think time. I'd like to pay attention to reoccurring thoughts, right? There's actually a chapter in my book that encourages those to pay attention to the thoughts we think. And sometimes I need to get rid of this thing right here could be the enemy of that, right? My distraction device, electronic distraction device. And so for me, I had an hour and 15 minutes to think on things. And I started to have a reoccurring thought once again about the lessons I was learning. And I thought, okay, I have these journals. I just started connecting the dots, Matt. Oftentimes in my life, it's not one profound defining moment I could point to. It's a small thought here and there that kind of keeps building. And so I took my journals and I started journaling some of the lessons that I learned. And the thing that really inspired me and motivated me is realizing that 3 years ago, what was playing in the background, Matt, is that I lost my father tragically. He lived in Toronto, Canada, and he struggled with addiction pretty much his whole life. And I got a call from the police department. They called me on Facebook. Interesting enough, in March was this the the party you came to, Matt? That was the 3 year anniversary of my father passing away. Because I realized when my father passed away,
Wow.
I chose to have a defining moment. Sometimes a defining moment, if you're not familiar with that, to me, what that means, to be clear, it's when I could point to something and it's forever different from that point in time. And usually it comes down to the thought basically making a decision to cut up all other options. And I decided that when I got that phone call, after thinking about it, first, of course, I cried. Next, I left the office and went home and I just started thinking about it. And I thought, okay, what can I learn from him? And I wrote down a bunch of lessons. Most of them are indirect things, right? To be present with my kids, to be a father, right? He left when it got hard. I don't like racing for me, Matt. It's not about it's not about the finish line and getting the trophy, even though those are fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the race for me is the race of life. The swimming this morning next to Ernie, the 90-year-old who inspires me. He's a phenomenal guy. And yet the swimming this morning, I did that. I sat at the edge of the pool, and the gentleman said, sometimes it's hard to just jump in, isn't it? I said, yeah, especially when it's still chilly. And my point is this, is that it's practice to be a person that keeps the commitment. For my kids, being a father and a husband is very important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there's times that my practice for how I show up for them starts with how I show up for myself this morning. Right? I jump in the water and swim, even though it's uncomfortable and I don't feel like it. Nobody's seeing me do it. Nobody will ever know about it except you guys now. It's in those moments on how I show up for myself is the practice for how I'm showing up for my family, because I want to keep going when marriage gets hard, because we've been together long enough tonight. I know there's seasons where it's challenging in relationships. So the endurance athlete, it's practice for my life, actually, to be a more intentional husband and father and not give up when it gets challenging, to keep going the distance.
So what is that conversation like for you that so here you are 3 years later, you've done
Mm-hmm.
all of these pretty incredible things. You've put yourself out there consistently day in and day out. Like I see you
Mm-hmm.
posting your 3 hour bike rides and then an hour run. And then it for a lot of people outside looking in, I mean, that's a lot. And they may say, well, it must be easy for you now. What's that conversation like with yourself every morning?
Um, boy, I connect easy to comfort. I heard somebody say that, it was last week on a podcast I was listening to. Somebody said that if we do what's easy today, it makes our tomorrows harder. If we do
Mhm.
what's challenging today, it actually makes our future easier. So I would say how important is easy, because when I think about, I'm thinking about John Maxwell now that anything worth having is uphill, meaning it's going to be
Mhm.
challenging. There's going to be a mountain to climb, right? So
Mhm.
when I think about being a husband, if what I'm looking for is easy, I'm wondering what that would look like in my marriage, because I believe it's actually work. My father-in-law, make sure he's not around. Him and I actually kind of got into a little debate a few years ago about this. He said that marriage shouldn't be work. I still disagree with him,
Mhm.
right? Because anything worth, I agree with John Maxwell, anything worth having, whether it's a fitness level, whether it's the profit goal you desire in your business, whether it's a relationship, you fill in the blank with what's relative to you. I propose that it's going to be challenging and it's going to be uphill at best. And here's the interesting thing as well, Matt, that I've noticed, that whenever I make a commitment and say I'm going to do that thing, and I mean it, like I mean the commitment, I intend to accomplish what I desire. It's like life always seems to have a test,
Mhm.
whether it's my knees hurting or the water's cold, just fill in the blank. There's always going to be a reason not to get after it and go after it. And so what I've learned is to pass the test. Otherwise, pass the test and move forward, or don't pass the test and then I just keep keep on that journey. Stay on that hamster wheel of living the tension of who I desire to be versus the reality of where I'm at right now. One of the books that's a short, easy read is it's called oh gosh, it's about the 5 regrets of the dying. And I
Mhm.
think
Yeah,
it's chapter 1. It says
yeah, Bonnie
living the
Rare.
life. Yeah, exactly. I think
Yeah.
it's first chapter. It's been a while since I've read it. It says that uh, the number one biggest regret is living a life that others thought they should live instead of the one they desire to live. And I think all of
Yeah.
us, if we create the space to actually think about it,
Yeah.
think about what it is you desire. And once we get clarity on what it is, who it is we desire to be, what we desire to have, there's a tension there, Matt. And I think that's when I look back, I didn't want to go there. I rather get caught up in the urgent, pressing things of today, just all of the things that I need to reply to the mixed text and all of the things, and live in the land of distracted, disconnected from who I actually desire to be. And then meanwhile, I live my life in frustration because I'm not walking out my purpose. Purpose answers the question, why? Ultimately, why am I here? It's fascinating to me. So many people that people, it blows my mind that there's people in the world, probably a lot of them, I'd have to Google it. There's people literally that did not wake up this morning. And yet here we are. I believe
Mhm.
life is a gift, and the gift that we give back to God, the universe, however you define your spiritual side of your life. For me, it's God. The gift today is a gift, and what I do with it is my gift back to him. And I don't take that lightly, right? It's a big deal.
Man, you hit on so many points there that like so many of the things that you said resonate so heavily personally, and I trust everybody on the call can feel something as well. I know that we're normally at time right now, but if it's okay with everybody else, we're gonna kind of keep going for a little bit. If you got to bounce, bounce. But we're just gonna keep this conversation going because I don't want to cut Chris off because this is really really good stuff. One of the things that you said, and your father-in-law, I feel this is. I think unfortunately a lot of people believe that marriage should be easy. And the thing is that I guess being married is easy. It's legal, it's binding. However, having a marriage that's passionate, that's inspiring, that's fulfilling, that's a partnership, oh, that's 100, right?
Good call.
Christy and I made a decision that this doesn't work unless we're both 100. It's not 50-50. Because if it's 50-50, there may be a day that both of you are at zero. And that's when it's at risk. It's either 100 or 100. It's 100, 100. So even if
Mm-hmm.
somebody dips, we make up the gap, right? Love that. This last year or the last 2 years, one of the things you hit, that first regret of the dying was one of my absolute number one pain points. Was I was so unhappy and I couldn't put my finger on to why. And what I realized is that I was living out everybody else's dreams other than my own. Like I was so many other people's passive income and I wasn't my own. And it was it was a very uncomfortable journey in order to redirect and like reset. And yet, I've had a lot of conversations with those that are on this call is that, oh man, it's been worth it. Mark said something the other day to me that I say it all the time, and he shocked me with it the other when we visited after the regional rally. He says, "Mark, do you remember what you said? What looks good?"
Well,
Well, oh, hold on, keep it safe.
you just being authentic.
Yeah, he said I haven't seen Mark in a few years, and Mark and I reconnected, and he says, man, that authenticity looks good on you. And it took me back because I didn't really focus on it other than like I made a commitment that like, okay, it's time for me to live this on my terms full blast. So thanks for sharing that. And that's a really great reminder from the book. We got some really good questions coming in here, right? Mark says, who are the people or podcasts in your life that you lean on?
Right now I'm borderline obsessed with a gentleman named Myron Golden.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's all over YouTube. Once you click on it, it's going to follow you around. However, it's well worth it.
Mm-hmm.
What else? The book Atomic Habits by James Clear. I know that's a familiar one, but for me, that's gold. That's one of those books that I keep circling back to. And also, the next one would be, I was just reading through this 2 days ago. I have an original copy of the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill that I bought off of eBay. It's like one of my prized possessions. And it's amazing to me how the thoughts that I choose to think actually become things. That it's just fascinating to me.
Not only that, right? When you put yourself into certain conversations, it creates new possibilities. And I can say very specifically that like when you and I get together, and Chris and I have been constantly, getting together every few months to check in, say, what are you up to? What are you up to? Because we always kind of push each other and inspire each other. And then the two, 3 times ago when we visited, you're like, yeah, I just finished my first book. And I'm like, wait, what? Because that was also on my heart, but in the back of my mind, again, I kept thinking like, well, I'm not an author. I'm like, I don't do all these things. And Chris says, no. Here's how you do it, right? There's a who you're missing, and that's where you connected me with Cody, right? And so, people grow into the conversations you create around them. We may have heard that somewhere before. And I know that I grow immensely just because of the conversations that we get to have. So I just wanted to share a note of gratitude for you for always also pushing me and pulling me forward.
That's huge. I agree. People do grow in the conversations we create around them, and also energy is created. Energy is contagious, even without saying anything. Check this out. I was thinking about this. I'll journal about this later because it's fascinating to me. This morning, the pool, all of the lanes were filled, and there's a guy named Jake. He said you could use this side, and I'm like, okay, well, you stay on that side, I'll stay on this side. We're swimming in the same lane. Jake swims fast. I mean, the dude is quick. And so I was swimming next to Jake, and then a gentleman, Ernie, who I love, he's incredible. He'll be 91 years old this year, and he's there 7 days a week swimming. And then he'll walk outside in his Speedos, which is just kind of weird, but pretty bold. Incredible guy. The point is that I was swimming. I was swimming next to Jake, and then I swam next to Ernie. When I was swimming next to the guy that was really fast, I swam quicker by 19 seconds per 100 yards. And I was not even trying to. I looked at my watch when I was swimming next to Ernie, who goes significantly slower. And I was just swimming at my regular pace, making no effort to try to go slower or faster. I was swimming, I think it was 19 seconds slower compared to the gentleman who was 90. And I just thought to myself, isn't that interesting? Even without saying anything, I'm impacted somehow, probably because energy is contagious. We don't even need to say anything. Just by the people we choose to surround ourselves with, I believe it actually makes a big difference in our life.
God, that's so good. That's crazy. So good, right? Who you're running with, who you're swimming with, what lane are you putting yourself into?
Man.
Do we hide from someone that's running faster than us because we feel a certain way, or do we put ourselves into the slower lane so we can feel better about ourselves? but it actually slows us down, right? There's so many parallels and lessons in there with that. I want to open this up for anybody else that's listening. What questions do you guys have for Chris? I mean, Chris and I get a chance to talk all the time. I don't want to continue to steer the conversation. I'd love for you guys to chime in and ask anything that's on top of mind. Mark, great. Mark says, listening to Chris now makes sense why I lost so many listings to him over the years.
That's funny.
I just keep wiping like tears from my eyes. I'm not usually a crier, but I don't know why everything you're saying just resonates so much. Like, holy cow, I don't know. It's been good.
I
Thanks,
guess
What's standing out to you, Michelle?
Yeah.
What was that?
I'm curious on what's standing out to you in particular.
Just really like the whole, like, being yourself, living for purpose. Like I have so many notes. What did I have? Like, challenges today makes the future easier. Really maybe refocusing and understanding that we need to focus on not necessarily the challenges itself, but the steps that you need to take to overcome the challenges, and just stop looking at everything as like a big mountain. Like, it can be a big mountain you have to climb, but instead of looking at the whole mountain, looking at it like one step at a time.
That's really important. With where I got hung up on writing a book, for example, is when I kept thinking about the finished product. Like, oh my gosh, I have a coach that's helping me write a book. Now I have to write a book. And it got to a point where you could fact check me on this one, Matt. I ghosted my coach, Cody, my writing coach.
Yeah, he told me.
The guy that was helping me get there. I did tell you this because we had another conversation about that. And Matt's really good at dropping. Every time I meet with Matt, he drops this one bomb question. It's just like he just waits to figure it out and just drops it on me. So that was a pretty special day. The point is that things are always going to happen, right? Rest assured that when it comes to, I'm assuming most of us have a real estate business here or other businesses, whatever the goal that we're looking for this year, just plan on there being an inconvenience. There's going to be things that are going to happen. And yet a committed person, Michelle, I promise that if you're truly committed to what you say you desire, you're resourceful, you will figure it out and it will happen. A committed person always finds a way. And if we're not committed, then of course we just find an excuse and we point to the inconvenience, the thing, the water being too cold, getting a flat on the bike, whatever it is, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Thank you for being vulnerable and being bold and sharing that, Michelle.
I actually laugh at Matt a lot because he likes to say he lives in the messy middle. So he's just a doer. Like, we'll figure it out as we go. And I'm like, complete opposite, perfection. Like, it's got to be perfect before I execute. So yeah, yeah.
So Michelle's in my lane right now going, slow down, slow down.
Nice.
Slow down.
And Matt's like, speed up a little bit.
Be like, just go. You're fine. Let's go. Let's go. It's like at least 90% done. We'll figure the rest out before anybody has to pay. Go.
Sounds like a good partnership.
Who's else got something else?
I thought a couple of things resonated. I mean, to think about what you're aspiring for at this time in my life. I mean, I'm not a youngster, so I need to think about that. I still want to work for a while, so I need to think about that. And also, if we do what is challenging today, it makes tomorrow easier. That really made me think. I think that's great.
I appreciate you sharing that. And, Peggy, I'm reminded that when it comes to, I think fundamentally the reason we work, generally speaking, is to earn an income by bringing value to others. And so, I'm curious, whose world is impacted as you earn that income? Is there a name or a person that comes to mind, Peggy? And it may be you.
Well, it's me, my husband, but also, I have 10 grandkids and all of that. I just want,
wow.
There's a lot of people. So
that's pretty special.
And kids, 3 kids too. One of them was Michelle here that was on here too. So
that's really good. I find like that day I showed up untrained, unprepared to run 12 miles with Matt. I think fundamentally as a human being, we tend to show up better when we realize how our goals or the profit in our business, for example, impacts those that we care about. I'm willing to endure to not let my friend Matt down and keep my commitment, sometimes by figuring out how it impacts those we love. That helps me get out of my comfort zone and do what's necessary to hit the goal because of how it impacts others.
Right.
Matt, this
Yeah,
is
Mark.
Mark, longtime listener, first time caller.
Thanks for the call. Thanks for
Wow.
coming.
I want to know, given the current market we are specifically in real estate, with all the lawsuit decisions that are coming down, what's your mindset going in as the general public starts learning the different perceptions, questions? I mean, there's a lot of fear and anxiety amongst all realtors right now that are living, for a career. I could make this another 5-minute question, but let's just get to it. How are you going to thrive?
So we only get to choose two things: how we perceive something and the actions that we take. And there's definitely two consensus when it comes to what's happening right now, that either this is a massive opportunity and business as usual, or the sky's falling and I should probably look for other opportunities. Same scenario, two different mindsets. When
Yeah.
it comes down to the technicalities of what's happening, this is about transparency, and nothing changes, and especially in our world. Our listing agreements, our buyer agreements already had commission specified. Now, this market, we've already said for the last 18 months that we've gone from a speed-based market into a skill-based market. And a skill-based market is going to require agents that can truly communicate and articulate value and help educate the consumer for what's best for them. Most of the sellers that we're talking to understand the benefit of continuing to provide buyer broker compensation to maximize the opportunity for them to get even more than the 3% that they might be saving. So we're working on education, practice, professionalism. And the thing is that buyers are now going to be doing listing presentations for buyer agency, where they're going to have to be able to market themselves and their value clearly and be articulate about why they are worth what they're worth. So massive opportunity. If your value proposition up to this point was, hey, I'll get you on a drip and I'll open the door when you're ready, you're probably going to get weeded out. If you've already been doing a needs analysis and you've been really taking people on and you've been sharing your opportunity of how you provide service, right? Because houses sell themselves. What we're selling is our service. We're a service-based industry, and not everyone is created equal. We're creating experiences through service. Getting good at that, having that conversation is going to set you apart.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things that you said is so in line with so many conversations Matt and I have had over the past year and a half. You said that you pay attention to patterns and recurring thoughts. And I tell Matt all the time, I don't believe in coincidences. So if I see people asking the same questions or I'm having the same conversations with someone, I'm like, I need to pay attention to that. And then people growing into the conversations and energy they create around them. My life is 150% different today than it was, 3 months ago, 6 months, a year ago. And so much of that is because of the conversations I've had with Matt and Michelle. And it's so amazing. It's scary. There is definitely some fear and like, what am I doing right now? But gosh, it's so much better but like the other thing you said about living the life for me versus for someone else. Yeah, it's hard and yeah, it's scary and there's still so much unknown, but it's also so fun. And there's like a lightness and freedom in doing that versus showing up every day because someone else expects me to do something. So it's really good.
Thank you for sharing that.
Any kind of final thoughts? One last thing you'd like to leave everybody before we jump off?
Was that to me, Matt?
Yeah.
I do want to mention shameless plug here. I dropped the link for my book in the comments, and there's really two reasons in particular that I think it's important to read it, especially right now with the market, like what Mark just mentioned. Number one, I believe this is going to be a year for all of us to go deeper in our clarity level for our vision. Because sometimes I think vision, it evolves. And so what that means is that vision, it changes and it can get more and more clear, or just flat out change. And I think this is going to be a year that we're going to have clarity for our vision, a sense of purpose, and then take massive action according to our plan. I think if we do those things, Mark, we're going to win this year. We'll figure it out. And this book, the goal is a few generations from now that the grandkids that I may or may not ever meet will have something that if at any point in their life they're feeling stuck, they need some encouragement. Everybody, Mark, you know me well, so people tell me I encourage people. What do I encourage people to do? I started to wrestle with that question. I encourage people to pursue their purpose and just discover their potential. Discover their purpose. And I do that primarily by helping them turn limiting beliefs into unlimiting beliefs, help them find clarity on what matters. I believe this year we're going to have to find clarity on what matters most. And then the third is going to be I already mentioned limiting beliefs, clarity. Oh, and then find the good. The news drives me nuts. They find all of the bad stuff in the world. What if we know this, Matt, what we choose to focus on expands, we get more of, right? So if I choose to focus on all the problems, I'm going to attract and get more problems. If I choose to find opportunities, because here's what blows my mind. I was teaching a group of agents in our MLS. I looked in a 7-day period. It was $2 million and some odd dollars in commission opportunity between 7 days of canceled and expired listings. Isn't that something? A multi-million-dollar opportunity just in the past 7 days. The point is that there's always enough to go around. The thing is we're gonna have to keep our mind right and not get sucked into all the drama. Whenever drama is high, usually production is low, right? Because drama is going to be the distraction. We want to avoid that. We want to run the opposite direction.
Love it. Love it. When drama is high, production is low.
Man,
the people that I roll with,
world.
the people that I roll with that are high production, interestingly enough, low drama. High production, low drama. High drama, you already know it's low production. You can't have both. Can't have both. Guys, was this valuable? Should we have Chris on again in the future? I saw a request, Chris. I don't know if you're doing this. Are you doing any like book clubs or like study groups around the what would it take to have an author-led book club for a very select group of individuals?
You know, that's yes. So let's go. Let's start next week. And Matt, can you and I work together
we'll figure this out.
Let's figure it out. Who would be interested? I'm curious. How many people?
Pretty much everybody on this call. I think we can.
Hold on. What finger is Mark holding up? Okay, that's the pointer finger. Okay, cool.
we never know with Mark. We never know.
Fair enough. Okay,
awesome.
Let's make it happen. Maybe you and I can strategize about that.
I think we got something. I think we got something coming. So, guys, stay tuned. If you don't know, if you haven't followed Chris, go ahead and follow Chris Ward on Instagram, Facebook, all over the places. He's not hiding. He's not a secret agent. He's not a secret leader. And he's just, again, great friend, a brother. I appreciate you. Thanks so much for dropping all of this wisdom. Every time we talk, it gets better and better.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys. This was your Feature Friday. I know we went a little long, but sometimes it is what it is. I can't stop the value. It just goes. It flows, right? Just don't get in the way of the value, man. All right. We'll see you guys Monday. Same time, same channel. Deuces.
Bye.